with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, you know, the economy seems to be really roaring right now, and you take a look at the unemployment numbers. I mean, very, very, very good. But what I will suggest was this has nothing to do with Biden. I mean,
I would hope not.
Nothing to do with Biden. And in fact, you know, if President Biden were to do some of the things that he's looking to do, you know, like declare war on American energy. I mean, American energy independence, an amazing accomplishment under President Trump. What happened there? So what does Biden do? I mean, he gets in and he cancels the Keystone Pipeline. And how many shows have we talked about the Keystone Pipeline? So he talks about infrastructure, and he wants to, you know, take American infrastructure to a whole new level. And he cancels one of the most important pieces of American infrastructure, moving energy very safely and efficiently across the continent, getting it to the refiners, and then ultimately getting it to the American consumer and the American manufacturer.
Well, yeah. What I find interesting with the word infrastructure, we've learned this week that one of the best friends of Joe Biden is Merriam-Webster, apparently. And they are rewriting what the definition of, infrastructure is. Sort of like what Bill Clinton was, the definition of is, which I thought was a remarkable statement. So we're back to that. And I do find that to be quite exciting to consider.
Well, let's bring in our first guy. He's a great friend of the show. He's been with us a number of times, talking about the Keystone Pipeline and many, many other topics. Certainly throughout the Obama years, there was a lot to talk about. And let me tell you, there's a lot to talk about now. And very pleased to welcome Stephen Moore, who is the co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Stephen, welcome back to Made in America.
Hi, Neil. Good to be with you.
So you're not the only one scratching your head about what's going on here with all this discussion of $2.something trillion of infrastructure, and what does President Biden do when he gets elected? Like one of the first things, I don't think that he waited to get back to the White House, and he cancels the Keystone Pipeline.
Well, that was a head scratcher, that's for sure. I mean, why a president who says he wants to rebuild American infrastructure would he cancel an infrastructure project that, where the people that working on those pipelines make, $75,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year. Those are blue-collar union jobs. They are a vital part of our infrastructure. We need the pipelines to get our oil and gas around the country, and so we can, export it. It's the safest and most environmentally secure way to get the oil and gas that we pump out of Texas and states like Oklahoma and North Dakota, up in North and Calgary, Canada. We want to make North America an energy zone, the energy dominant zone in the world, and we were well on our way to doing that. And all of a sudden, Biden, not only does he cancel that Keystone Pipeline, then he says no more drilling on federal lands. We have by some estimates, $30 to $40 trillion of energy resources under federal lands. And I mean, think about that. We could retire our entire national debt with the value of all this oil and gas. And Biden says, no, we're not going to use it. We have more oil, gas, and coal than any other country in the world. It is an absurdity. It is an obscenity, and it's going to do real damage to our economy. Meanwhile, they want to give literally $1 trillion for solar power and wind power. By the way, do you remember Solyndra?
Oh yeah,
that was a major conversation.
It was close to $1 billion that we flushed down the Potomac on that one, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the price tag was about $600 million, but you're pretty close. And it never produced a single kilowatt of electricity. This was under Obama. Remember, they said, "Oh, this is going to be the energy source of the future. This is going to be the greatest solar company ever." It went bankrupt. The guys who started the company walked away with $500 billion of our money, and it never produced anything. And then we have dozens and dozens of examples of those kinds of boondoggles under Obama. And when I was over, I thought, thank God we're never going to do that again. Biden said, no, we're going to spend 10 times more money on this stuff. So I'm very nervous about this. I think it's going to have a very negative impact. I think, look, I don't have a problem with solar and wind, but if it's so efficient, if it's such a great energy source for the future, why does it need, nearly $1 trillion in subsidies? I mean, my feeling is we should use all our energy. We should use our oil, our gas, our coal. I'm a big fan of nuclear power, hydropower. Why does the government have to determine what kind of energy we're going to use?
Well, that's exactly correct. And you're right. Back in the Solyndra days with Obama, we were picking winners and losers, and that's a very bad road for us to go down. Yeah. But, when I look at this whole thing, there are multiple reasons for me to really not understand exactly what you're saying, scratch my head and say, I don't get this. I mean, we had our own energy. We're energy independent. We're exporting energy. The money stayed in the United States. The political leverage that we had alone with energy was the one thing. If you think about Russia, what was Russia doing well in at the time when we were developing all this new energy? They're exporting energy. It's one socioeconomic they had out there that was actually working for them. And we had the ability to usurp that dramatically. Political leverage, jobs, and it was enormously safer. So what are we getting wrong, and what is Biden getting right? I don't think he's right on anything on this.
Well, you make a really good point. This is a little part of history that people don't understand. 20 years ago, Russia thought they could corner the market on natural gas. And this was right prior to the whole shale oil and gas revolution that we have in the United States, thanks to American technology. And so they wanted to do to natural gas what OPEC had done for oil. I mean, you guys remember when OPEC had cornered the market on oil, and they held a blade to the neck of the American economy. And so Russia wanted to do that with natural gas, and lo and behold, we developed these new technologies that were used in North Dakota, in Pennsylvania, in West Virginia, in these other states, and it turned out to be just a home run. We reduced the price of natural gas from like $10 to $2. We basically practically bankrupted the Russians because now natural gas was so plentiful. And the thing that's so ironic about all that is that now Biden wants to shut it down. Now, who do you think is going to bet? This is the Made in America show, right? Make it in America. Now we're going to have to get our oil and gas from Saudi Arabia and from Iran and from Russia. I mean, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. These are countries that are hostile to the United States. It's not just an economic issue, guys. It's a national security issue.
Well, I do find it strange that one of the things that I was so pleased to see under the Trump administration, and you certainly played a great role in that, Stephen, is that, we were free of the capriciousness of the ups and downs of the Middle East. Free of it. It didn't matter what OPEC wanted to do. We were destroying their whole concept. And here we are now right back where we were, that we are now stuck listening to these other people. And we, someone sitting in the Midwest will pay the price of that for someone making a decision, over in Saudi Arabia.
Now, you're 100% correct. And, what's so interesting about this story is that now people say, oh, that's okay. We're going to use wind and solar power and so on. Oh, we're going to have electric battery cars, and we're not going to need oil and gas. Wait a minute. Do you know what percentage of the cars on the road today are electric battery?
As less than 10?
2%.
About 1%.
1%. That's all.
99% of the cars.
Cool, that was better than the last test that Stephen gave me. I was only one off. The other one, I was 8 off.
So I mean, most people think, 20%. No, about 1 or 2% of our cars on the road are electric vehicles. There aren't that many Teslas on the road, folks, and so that means 97% or 98% or so are using old-fashioned oil and gas. So Biden thinks we're going to, within 10 years, 10 or 15 years, produce no oil and gas here in the United States. Well, let's say that we let's say by 5-fold we increase the number of electric vehicles over the next 15 years. Okay, we're still going to have 80% of the cars are still going to be using gas. Now, if we're not producing oil, where are we going to get the oil? right? I mean, this is not complicated stuff, right? We're going to get the oil from Saudi Arabia and Iran and Russia and Venezuela and countries that hate us. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Really, you can't make up things this stupid. We should be producing our own oil and gas so we don't have to import it from countries that hate us. By the way, these are jobs. I've been to the oil patches in America, Midland, Texas, and out in, parts of the North Dakota and Oklahoma City. Those are good-paying jobs. Those are jobs that the truckers make $100,000 a year.
So we just got a little time left. We're going to take a break, but just in a little time we got left, and we've got still a lot more to talk about. What do you think the politics of this is? I mean, back in 2009, there was cap and trade. Remember cap and trade? I mean, that came back, right when Obama got elected. It was cap and trade, but it didn't go anywhere.
Couldn't get it. He couldn't get it.
Even with a Democrat House and Senate, he couldn't get. And they paid a huge price in the midterms for that. Are the politics any different now?
We want a made in America energy policy.
Stephen, thanks for your very insightful thoughts. Unfortunately, we're out of time, folks. We've been together with Stephen Moore, co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Stephen, thanks for being on the show. Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I have a lot of things to talk about. We're still going to talk about energy, but a lot more too. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, I mean, you have some really, really direct points, I mean, very important points about who benefits from the Biden energy policy. But let's just say, first of all, not the Americans, not the American worker, right? Because American energy independence means it's American workers, it's American businesses that are benefiting from America's energy policy. But if you sort of outsource to this green thing and you say, okay, now we're going to, as Stephen says, I mean, it's crazy to think that we're going to be energy independent or we're going to even be an energy exporter. We were an energy exporter. Think about that. We had more energy developed in America than we could use, right? So we became a net export. And by the way, a lot of countries were depending on American exports of energy, and therefore they were not depending on Iran in some countries that, let's just say that they don't have our best interests at heart, right? So there's a lot of ramifications here. But who financially benefits from solar panels and windmills and all of these things, electric car batteries? Who's making those? Who's going to benefit from that?
Well, I mean, that's the whole point, and I think that's what people have to be looking at. So we listen to those on the left, the progressives, the Marxist commentary and so forth, and they're saying we have to go to windmills, we have to go to solar panels, most of which are built in China. They're built in China. It's a big deal for China, all right? And who benefits from that? China. If you're going to use electric cars, and electric cars are these incredibly expensive and I had a hybrid car. The batteries your battery goes down in a hybrid. I got to tell you, it's a lot of money. A lot of money. That's why you don't want to, you lease the car. Don't own the car. You don't want to be stuck with it. But what's in a battery, Neil? Rare earth materials are used to create these incredible batteries that go into these cars. Now, where do we get rare earth material? Well, we can get the rare earth materials from Alaska. We know that. We had the governor of Alaska on. And he said, no, we have all these materials. We're dying to use it. We're just getting started. We're going to use that. But the number one country in the world for rare earth materials that are going into the batteries, as you and I sit here in the studio, and the folks out there are listening, is China. So let's think about that for a minute. There are the dots. Number one, solar panels. Number one country in the world, China. Windmill turbines. Number one country in the world producing the material that's used to create the windmill turbines, China. All right, that's number two. Number three up here. God, I feel like door number three. Door number three is rare earth material, China. So you have China, China, China right across the board. This is 777. Whoever hits that in Vegas wins a lot of money. And the guy winning a lot of money happens to be Chinese over in China, in Beijing. So they make a lot of money. Now, what is the implication of that? That means China, if you're going to go along with the Biden and the lefty policies, the AOCs, the Squad, and all those other people, they will have an opportunity to say what's going on in our economy. They will have a major control of our economy. To me, that's a clear and present danger to the survival of our economy in the United States. So that bothers me. How can we allow that to occur while we're trying to maintain this country? And, oh, by the way, it's really funny because the Obama-Biden administration, remember when they had the stimulus plan, and we were just talking about that. Those shovel-ready jobs that, I guess, Obama was laughing about it, saying, I guess they weren't really shovel-ready. But here we have Biden saying, well, we're going to have all these great green energy jobs. Green energy. It's amazing. They have two words, green energy, and the stimulus back with Obama had two words, shovel-ready. Was there a little parallelism there? And it turns out those jobs don't exist. The miners, the welders, the people who are working on the XO pipeline, they're all looking for those jobs. All right, where are those jobs? Where are those jobs? You're going to get $75,000. What am I doing? Where are the jobs? They don't exist. And if you want to do that, I hope you speak Mandarin, because they're done in China. And that's what concerns me, Neil, that all of the stuff that we're hearing right now is China-oriented, pardon the pun.
Well, unfortunately, you're right. And I just can't believe that we would want to exchange an energy independent, an energy exporting country. And you look at the statistics, and Stephen brought this up. I mean, how many percentage of American cars are electric?
1% to 2%.
Yeah, 1 to 2%. Now, in some cities, you may see a lot of Teslas, but that is not representative of the United States. There's still very, very few electric cars in the United States. Why? Because they're just not yet practical. And
they're very expensive.
But they will be. But it's just not now.
That's right.
So, hey, we got to evolve. This is an evolution. It's not a revolution, right? An evolution means it will take time. We will get there, and the technology will improve. American ingenuity will be the ones improving this technology. We will be the ones owning the patents. We will be the ones manufacturing. The reason that it's not happening right now, because it's just not economically viable in the United States to switch. And so, therefore, hey, it's going to be offshored. And your very, very valid point is going to be offshored to China. So we're exchanging American jobs for Chinese jobs in one of the greatest industries in the United States, where people get paid very, very well, the energy sector.
Yeah, I agree. There are 2 points I'd like to follow up with you on. Number one, what you're really talking about is free market. If the market exists, then the manufacturers will produce to feed that market, because they know that there's a profit for them in that. That will push everything you just talked about.
Hey, Rich, we're going to pivot here in our next sector. We're going to talk about bringing our jobs back to our cities. Judge Glock from the Cicero Institute just published a piece, very fascinating piece. He's taken a look at this. It's very fascinating. Stay with us. You don't want to miss it.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, I mean, we've talked a lot on our show about bringing our manufacturing jobs back home. And
that was the basic premise of the show many years ago.
Yes, it was. Made in America.
That's right.
And you can see certain states have done a really, really exceptional job. I mean, I'm thinking about South Carolina. What happened with Boeing? I'm thinking about Tennessee and what happened with Volkswagen. Think about Alabama, turning down the union a couple of weeks ago. Look, you had Amazon, very powerful company, but, they had a union vote. The federal government, the U.S. government was behind the union vote. They wanted the union to succeed. Obviously, huge donors to the Democrat Party, the unions. Almost all their money goes to the Democrat Party. I mean, it's payback time, right? Mm-hmm. Biden wins, so now let's pay back the unions. But it lost. Despite, in Tennessee, if you recall, you had the Obama administration at the time. You had Volkswagen themselves in Germany wanting the union, wanting unionization, but the workers in Tennessee said, no, we don't want the union. So if you travel around the world, I mean, it's not surprising you see in the South, the right-to-work states, there's, the common denominator is right-to-work states, right, that they're attracting a lot of business, a lot of manufacturing. But can our cities attract manufacturing? I mean, that's a big question. I mean, it'd be amazing if they could. Now, you travel around the world, you see a lot of cities, a lot of great cities in the world, they do have significant manufacturing going on within their confines. And it does employ a lot of people. Can that happen in the United States? We're very pleased to be bringing on right now Judge Glock, who's from the Cicero Institute, and he's just published a piece about bringing manufacturing back to our cities, and can it be done? So, Judge, welcome to Made in America, and can we bring manufacturing to our cities?
Thank you so much for having me. And the short answer is yes, that manufacturing still, obviously, as you mentioned, is a very essential part of many cities' economy. And luckily, there are lots of ways that cities can do better. One of the ones I mentioned in the piece, and one of the ones that you've already discussed, is right-to-work laws. And we've seen the effects on that. I've mentioned in the piece a 1999 study which looked at the state lines. And if you could look at counties directly on one side of the state line with a right-to-work law and counties directly on the other side of the state line without a right-to-work law, and you saw pretty stark differences. Those counties in the right-to-work states had about 20% more manufacturing jobs. And recently we've seen places like Indiana or even very surprising Michigan go that route. You've already beginning to see them reap the rewards of increasingly flexible labor arrangements there. And that's what manufacturers respond to.
Well, you would think, Neil and Judge, to me, when I've traveled around the country and around the world for the different businesses that I owned, there are nuances to each city and location that they're at, which gives value to an organization to move into that environment. I.e., when you have Dallas, for example, the big push for Dallas back in the early 90s, they were one of the few, along with Atlanta, one of the few airports that had multiple active runways at all times, 24/7, 4 or more. Chicago is an example. Atlanta was a great example. And that was very, very important. It was in the heartland of the United States. It was within, 24 hours or less anywhere in the United States you could ship your products to, whether it's on land. They had 7 trunk lines for rail. So they had all this opportunity to transport what would be manufactured, which is why Dell was there and some other major organizations right outside of Dallas. EDL was there with their organization. So are we in that position today? Are the cities able to say, all right, look, here's our shopping list of all the great reasons why you want to be in Indianapolis, let's say. Is that applicable today, Judge?
Absolutely. So infrastructure is absolutely crucial to cities and their manufacturing prowess. If you look, as I mentioned, at the history, just about every country has a centralized manufacturing heartland. That's almost a universal. Obviously, ours is still in the Midwest, and the reason for that is infrastructure. A lot of that infrastructure is aging, but basically there's a virtuous cycle where back in the late 19th century, this is where the canals were located. This is where the first highways came. This is where some of the early airports were, and they were all set up to service that manufacturing. And they continued to, even after the height of that manufacturing, that infrastructure was still there. And that explains why places like Wisconsin and Indiana have 16+% of their labor force in manufacturing, while other cities other states usually have less than 7% in most of the country. There's a lot of stickiness in manufacturing, and that infrastructure is a big reason for that. Now, the Midwest hasn't done itself any favors over the long term about a lot of its manufacturing policies. But over recent years, you've seen the right-to-work changes, and you've seen other changes that I mentioned in property taxes that allowed that sort of efflorescence to continue.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned the Erie Canal in upstate New York. The Erie Canal gave rise to great manufacturing areas, Neil.
Erie, Pennsylvania.
Just incredible opportunities.
Buffalo.
And also, along with that water, they had the ability, when electricity came in, they had the ability to have electricity. So you needed power. So you had water power, you had electric power, you had transport power, the ability to get around and get your products out. That's why you had towns like Gloverville and Amsterdam, Schenectady, and all those upstate places going west towards Buffalo on what would be the thruway today. You had incredible industrial communities, at the heartland of New York State. And I think it would be exciting to think that could come back.
Yeah, I think absolutely. If you look at those, again, that central waterway, there was the Erie Canal connected through the Illinois Canal all the way down to Mississippi is what gave the heartland its central place. And if you look at the industrial heartland in Europe, it's similar. It's that place where the Rhine River and the Meuse up around the German Ruhr area connects. And that thing is still essential for where manufacturing wants to move heavy products.
Very good. Hey, Judge, we need to take a quick break. We're with Judge Glock from the Cicero Institute. We are talking about manufacturing in our cities. I'd like to ask Judge, what cities, are attractive for U.S. manufacturing? Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we're together with Judge Glock from the Cicero Institute. Judge, so, if you were looking at an American city right now, or a group of American cities, what would be your, who's set up to bring manufacturing back? And is there something that you could point to right now of some real success stories in that area?
Well, there's a lot of different places. You've already mentioned places like South Carolina, Alabama, that have set up a lot of the infrastructure to attract manufacturing. And one of the things you can also see is, in the virtuous cycle, is places like Memphis or Louisville that have a central airport with places like FedEx coming through that allow a lot of those manufacturing people to companies to work and build off that spot. But this may be some bias. But I'm based here in Austin, Texas. If you look at places like Dallas and Houston, they have an incredible efflorescence of manufacturing, not just because of the labor laws and conditions, but because they have what some people deride as a sort of sprawling model of city growth. Manufacturing is the most expansive sort of city aspect of a city. It tends to be the farthest from the center because it needs large, low-slung manufacturing plants. It needs lots of electricity and utilities around it that aren't usually good in very dense areas. Places like Dallas, Houston, and Fort Worth and elsewhere have those sort of sprawling manufacturing areas and can conduce to it. If you try to cram all manufacturing into, Lower East Side, which used to be the absolute center of the American garment manufacturing, it won't work anymore. We have a different model right now, and those cities need to be able to grow out. And if you try to constrict them in with green belts or restrictions on a building, you're not going to get that manufacturing.
Well, it would seem to me, Neil, that workforce, two words I think are very, very important and why cities were always open and looking for manufacturing, but that the cities had a workforce. As a matter of fact, the suburban agrarian folks in the turn of the 19th century moved from the agrarian society. You had a diminution of the farm environment. And you had a lot of people moving up to Detroit and New York and so forth because they wanted to take part in the ability to work in manufacturing plants. They would make more money, and it would be steady and constant. So to me, maybe there's an opportunity to reinvigorate the excitement of the late 19th, early 20th century with the rise of the industrialization folks in the cities, that we can do it again, but with a 21st century aspect to it.
So, Judge, you think that's possible? I mean, is this coming back? I mean, it sounds like some places has got it, some need to do some work, but the economic benefit of this would be absolutely amazing. But a big but here is, what is the Biden administration going to do to support it?
Well, it's tough to say. So obviously the infrastructure bill, as it's proposed now, includes a lot of stuff that isn't really infrastructure. But there are some aspects that are encouraging, such as I believe it's almost they have tens of billions of dollars to improve our waterways, inland canal systems, and so forth, which are exactly what a lot of the manufacturers need. There's also tens of billions of dollars that go to airports. But there's other things that are just going to be long-term problems for it. I mentioned in the piece one of the biggest, by far, in fact, the biggest regulatory restriction on manufacturing is environmental restriction. And manufacturers bear the overwhelming brunt of the environmental restrictions in place today. I mentioned some things such as specifically water environmental rules, which seem to bring at this point relatively little gain. Our water systems actually in general are very clean. They have few deaths or diseases or so forth associated with them, usually good fishing. And yet they keep ratcheting up the restrictions on what plants can get access to water, what plants can dispose of their hot water and used water and so forth. And that's going to be a big problem. As long as they have these very tight environmental restrictions and very long permitting process, it's going to be tough to get those plants in place.
So, Rich, I mean, it's I think a very essential thing. But we've heard this before, right? I mean, how many times have we talked about regulation and how regulation kills? And that's like right at the top of the list. Judge points it out in his piece. We're just completely overregulated, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
No, I think it's going to get worse, Neil. I mean, we were in a bad situation with overly regulated. 75,000 pages a year of regulations were going out. And then when Trump came in, that was starting to be, eliminated.
Well, for every new regulation, you had to get rid of two.
Exactly.
But now that's out the window.
That's out the window.
And then we talk about taxation, right? And now we get a competitive tax rate, globally. And now to pay for this infrastructure bill, which largely is not infrastructure, maybe a third of it is, now we're going to raise taxes to be very uncompetitive globally. So what's that going to do? It's going to take business away from our cities.
Well, there's another thing to consider, and I got to ask Judge about this too. In some of these major cities, like New York and Chicago, and I say L.A., but L.A.'s a hybrid; doesn't really fit into that set theory. But other major areas in the country, a lot of them controlled by the Democrats, they are overly taxed. You're living in an area that is overly taxed. That's why people are leaving those areas. Now, what does that mean for the proposed manufacturers to move in those areas? Can they afford that?
Well, the short answer is no, and one of the most important issues is property taxes. Manufacturers, they are basically impose very minimal cost on the cities or counties in which they exist, but they have very high property taxes. Specifically, a lot of states still impose personal property tax on them. So while you may just be taxed on your house, it'd be the equivalent. The manufacturers are often taxed on their furniture, every new piece of equipment they employ, everything else they use, and that's going to be devastating for them trying to expand. Yeah,
very, very good point. Yeah, so I got to tell you, I don't think it's going to happen in this administration. And even in a Republican administration, getting our cities, back to where they are competitive globally manufacturing, except for other, like Dallas, and we've heard from Judge talk about Dallas in that city, Fort Worth, of course, that sister city. There are places to look to. There are examples, Rich. Hey, Judge, thanks for being on the show. Judge Glock from the Cicero Institute.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, I can't believe that, we've had another great show, and it's coming to an end. We've still got a few minutes left, still a lot to talk about. It's been wonderful to spend the time with you. Obviously, you got some incredible ideas, and you really know how to express them. We really, really appreciate that. Let's talk about inflation. Inflation. We haven't talked about that for a while, but let me tell you, as an American manufacturer, and I produce products, and we make products, and we export our products around the world, but our costs right now are dramatically increasing. I mean, dramatically increasing. Freight costs absolutely going through the roof. Absolutely going through the roof. During COVID, back, a year ago, April of last year, there was, the economies were closing around the world, not just in our country, but our country, lockdowns. People were staying at home. They were closing the restaurants, the entertainment industry, so many different things. I mean, just how many industries basically came to a screeching halt. So what happened? A lot of the shipping companies, trucking companies just took capacity off the market. What did the airlines do? They took airplanes, airliners, and mothballed them. They said, okay, it's just not worth having them in service anymore. So then the economy comes back, and the people are staying at home. I mean, what people are calling nesting. People invested a tremendous amount of money in their homes. Absolutely amazing. If you're selling home products and things that home improvement products last year, I mean, these companies had a stunning year as people looked at their homes as their offices.
Well, that's true. I mean, you couldn't even find appliances.
Oh, go into
during
a Walmart. Go into
pandemic.
anywhere. I mean, try to buy any appliance, and it's like it's months to get it. Right?
I did that.
Right.
I bought new washers and dryers. Washer. How many do I need? One of each. For my home, and decided to do it. 3.5 months later, they were delivered.
Right.
3.5 months later.
Well, think about it. Well, that was the surge, and that was a result of COVID because of the nesting. And one reason is that the capacity of the manufacturers were greatly hit by COVID because so many workers were out, and it was just, you didn't go to work, and people didn't feel comfortable going out and going to work. And in the whole supply chain of materials and everything that you needed to make products, you couldn't get the materials. I mean, all of the different commodities and components and sub-assemblies that, hey, look, made in America, right, but still a lot of components and a lot of things come from overseas. I mean, we are in a global economy, and just about every company relies on a global supply chain. So now you have all the shipping companies taking all this capacity off the market. You got all the airlines taking all the capacity off the market, and then you have this surge of business. And I got to tell you, it's just made everything more expensive. It's made freight more expensive. Can you get freight? It's made raw materials, resins are going through the roof right now. You can't get resin. They're rationing resins right now. If you injection mold and you're using plastic in your products, they're giving you half of what you normally would buy. They're rationing it because the demand of resins has just gone up so much, and because the winter storm that hit Texas, it took a lot of refineries off. A lot of the people who process the resins, the plastic resins, polycarbonate, and so on, they didn't have the capacity to produce. So what's happened? This has all created the perfect storm that we're looking at cost increase like it's crazy. And I don't think the American consumer has felt that yet. No, but it's coming. And the other thing that happened is that, all of the uninsurance benefits, being extended, made it much better for people to stay at home instead of working, right? So that actually, had the unintended consequence of when the economy came back, that there was nobody wanting to work because they were being paid to stay at home. So if you're going to go to work, hey, look, you're going to have to pay me something really, really exciting, because I could stay at home and collect on insurance, and even though I make a little bit less, I still don't have to go to work, so I'll just stay at home. So all of this converges on a perfect storm that labor, materials, freight, everything, all of the inputs that goes into manufacturing has gone way up. And Rich, you're going to have the final word, but I think we're looking at a major increase in inflation here coming in the months, and I just don't know what it's going to do to our economy. But a lot of people, it's going to hit everybody's pocketbooks. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I agree. I think inflation's going to hit food right now: food, gas, heating oil, electrical, shipping costs, appliances, furniture. Anything that has to be shipped will cost more.
Well, Rich, you got the final word, but unfortunately, we're out of time. We're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.